Hello and welcome back to 67 Hail Hail. We're back for another live reaction, and it was Preston nil, Celtic 1, or the other way about, rather, because we were at home. That's a great start.
Hmm.
It was Ben Whiteman with the penalty in the 63rd minute. I'm here with John. John, how did you find the game?
Yeah, the game was a little bit frustrating. I think it's really clear Celtic are still a work in progress. As always, we don't read too much into the result or anything like that. But there are little signs here and there, some positive signs, some negative signs. So yeah, let's get stuck into it.
Yeah, it seemed as if it was. We're still trying to get used to Ange Postecoglou's sort of methods and the way he plays, sort of front forward, front pressing style of play,
Hmm.
attacking style of play. Um, I thought we started off the game quite well. I don't know about you, but we had Turnbull and McGregor playing the ball quite nicely, nice interchange. But we never really had that cutting edge when it came to in front of goal. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean the attack looked a little bit disjointed all day. I would suggest it kind of livened up a little bit in the second half when Edward came on and Abadza came on, who I thought looked pretty sharp. I think for me, the impressive performers, especially in the early goings, were McGregor and Adam Montgomery. I thought that both of those did well, and David Turnbull, of course. So it was it was more of a midfield game in the first half, I would suggest, and then in the second half we tried to press an advantage, and unfortunately just couldn't find the goal.
Before we talk about obviously Preston's goal,
Mm-hmm.
how good was it to see fans back in the stadium after
Oh,
18
brilliant!
months? I mean, even though it was 2000, they made themselves heard when the teams came out. It was great to see the fans back, and hopefully that's the start of more and more to come. Obviously, with Wednesday, we've got 9,000 coming through the door, so hopefully this is the start of getting back to a sort of normality after a while.
Yeah, I mean, from a Celtics perspective, it's obviously. I mean, it was great seeing just people posting photos from their seats on Twitter, which I've missed for
Mhm.
some reason. Didn't realise I'd missed that until I saw it earlier. But just football misses its randomness when fans aren't in attendance. I think fans add a kind of extra dynamic, a kind of unpredictability about the game. I think it can, fans being in attendance can change games. We know that, especially at Celtic Park. So yeah, even though there was only 2,000, it's a great start. There'll be quadruple that for the Michelin game. So it's a decent start, and hopefully we get back to tens of thousands before too long.
Yeah, fingers crossed, because we're obviously the 12th man when it comes to. I know
Hmm.
the Celtic sort of hierarchy like to sort of talk about that, but we are really a 12th man with the team. In the first half, we had a couple of chances. Obviously, McGregor and Turnbull had a
Hmm.
couple of chances themselves, but we never really tested the goalkeeper. They were more sort of snapshots than anything else. We never really troubled them. But as we went into the second half, obviously 60 minutes in, we had a couple of changes. Barkas came off. I thought Barkas had a really good first half. He looked really confident. He was playing as a sort of midfielder again, like the last couple of games. But aye, we could talk about Barkas before the goal. I thought Barkas was really good in the first half, and
Yeah.
hopefully that 45 minutes we were just taking him off for a sort of cautiousness for the Michelin game.
Yeah, but because I was actually worried about Barkas, when you saw the pictures of his fingers,
Mm-hmm.
kind of bound together. Obviously, we knew that he hadn't broken his fingers, but even dislocation sometimes that can be a bit tricky with ligaments and stuff. So there was a bit of a concern that he might be missing for the Michelin game. So I was just delighted to see him in the lineup. And then again, yeah, he looked confident and strong in that first half. Made a pretty decent save early on, and then obviously kind of shut out Sinclair when he was through and goal. So those were promising moments from him. Certainly, obviously, compared to what we saw from Barkas at points last season, I was encouraged.
Yeah, definitely. I thought he looked a lot more confident than he did last season. I think Ange just sort of put his arm around him and said, "You're going to be the number one, at least for
Hmm.
now." So it looks pretty confident in that aspect. But we could go on to talk about the goal. There was a ball into
Hmm.
the box, and then Bain sort of comes out, and it's quite clumsy, but it was a contentious decision at best, I would say. Kevin Clancy points to the spot after the sort of contact with the attacker.
Hmm.
What did you make of the penalty decision?
I mean, I obviously thought it was soft. I don't really know what other people are saying about it. I kind of avoided social media in the second half there, but from my perspective, it felt like Bain was almost standing his ground, and the attackers kind of tried to look for the penalty. That's just the way I saw it. I would say it was on the soft side of things. Probably not a penalty for me, But sometimes the referees need to warm up as well for the season.
Yeah, they certainly are. That's hopefully they're not giving that too many times. Hopefully they're giving it the other way. Ben Whiteman came up trumps and scored the penalty, and that was their sort of best sort of chance. I know they had a couple of chances where they get close to the goal, but that was their one clear cut chance, and they obviously got it. But going into the second half, who sort of stood out for you? Because I thought Rogic was really good when he was on the ball, sort of making things happen in the second half. I thought Abada as well was great when he came on. He showed that he's not shy. What did you think about the sort of subs that were coming on throughout the second half?
Yeah, I mean, I think Abada looks confident, and I think that's probably obviously what you want from an attacking winger. He'll be desperate to impress, I think. Certainly from the fan media conference on Friday, what was coming through was that he's quite sure of himself, but in a good way. You need that from an attacking player. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he has to offer. He had a kind of half decent shot on target, kind of was a bit too central, good power on it, and yeah, it's good to see him try to get into those kind of positions and link up with players immediately. Even he's only had one training session with the team, so the fact that he can come in and play even just a couple of nice passes with a couple of nice combinations in the team is a positive for me.
Yeah, he was definitely showing he could do some of the same tricks as the sort of last sort of 11 that we had as a winger in Scott Sinclair. I know we had Klamala, but he was a striker. But it was great to see Sinclair back in the team, back at Celtic Park, back in his sort of spiritual home that he likes to call it. But going back to the first half, I thought that was great from Barkas the way he sort of pushed Sinclair out wide and forced him into a sort of low percentage shot, which was good. I thought that was a good way of dealing with the winger. In terms of sort of performers, who sort of stood out to you? Would you say Montgomery had another sort of standout game? Or
yeah, I mean, especially early on, I think. I mean, I think Montgomery looks like. I mean, and I know that he's kind of playing further forward at the moment, but I do think he looks like a good shout for that left back spot instead of Taylor. That's just my personal. If we get the Japanese guy in, and who apparently can play kind of on that left side, and then you have Montgomery behind him, I wouldn't be against that, I don't think. Obviously, we need to see how all that plays out. Still unconvinced by Greg Taylor. I know people like him. I know he's got his backers. I know some people really don't like him. I'm kind of in the middle, but I still think we can do better in that position. I mean, I think overall, I mean, where's your head at with pre-season in general? I mean, just aside from this game, how are you feeling about Celtic's preparedness for this match on Tuesday?
I would say I'm sort of 50-50 in the middle. The first two games were sort of more comforting than the last two, I would say. I think that's more due to the fact that we've lost our width out wide with Johnson and Karamoke and Dembele not playing the vast majority of the past two games. I feel like they were, or sort of the wingers were sort of a big part of our play that was working so well in the first two games. But I think it is just a working process at the end of the day, isn't it? We're still trying to get used to Ange's methods, and you don't want to make too many sort of rash opinions when we're only 4 games in. But at the same time, we've got a massive game on Wednesday. I mean, Midtjylland are a sort of settled team. I know they've had a couple of players sort of getting linked for different moves. They're obviously going to Rennes, their sort of main sort of midfielder, I think it was. Is it Sehust? They're a settled team, and it's going to be a tough ask, I think, especially against a team that's so settled. And I mean, it's never going to be easy coming into the sort of qualifiers when we were second placed. It's easier for the first place team with our sort of seeding and whatnot. But what do you think about this game on Wednesday?
I mean, I think you're right in saying it's a 50-50 thing. I think that's spot on. I mean, Midtjylland are no great team themselves. I mean, I watched the highlights of their game on Friday against OB, their first competitive game of the season. The goals they conceded, didn't really cover themselves in glory, especially the second one that went in straight from a corner after a defensive mix-up. So I think there's avenues there to get at them. I'm just worried that we're seriously undercooked in that defence. I mean, and it's nothing against the players or who's there. I mean, Uragiri's just come in the door. It's not his fault. He's a young guy. He's played 20 or so games for Sheffield Wednesday.
Still looks very raw, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Still looks very raw.
And there's every chance he could be thrown in at the deep end here, which is a little bit unfair, but that's just the situation we're in. I think Ange has been dealt a rough hand here. And we've just got to wait and see, really. I don't think it's a sense of, Chris Sutton's been given it big licks today. both in his Daily Record column and on Premier Sports, in the kind of woe is me, sky's falling in scenario. Whereas, Ange is working miracles here to get through against Midtjylland. I don't quite subscribe to that. I do think it's a 50-50 thing. And we're just going to wait and see now. And that's the scary part. I mean, I do think we look undercooked, and it's not based on the pre-season performances themselves. It's just about the personnel we've got and the positions, or don't have, so to speak. And the transfer business hasn't been done quickly enough. And it's all up in the air, Ryan, and that's the stress of worrying and hoping about Celtic.
It's annoying too, because we've been in this sort of position since you could say January, February, when we knew that the league was over. We knew there was going to be a high turnaround of players. I think you could even say that we were in this sort of position last season, even early doors, because we knew some players didn't want to be at the club. We needed to get them out, and then we needed to get new players in. But it's that turnaround of players. But you're just hoping that we get the sort of business done. We've obviously got Hugo coming in the next couple of days. He's obviously had his last game today with Vissel Kobe. I don't know if you tuned in to watch. I was watching him for the first 8 minutes until I was quietly impressed by the way he goes about his business. I liked the way he started off his attack with his team and then ended it with his finish. So what do you think about Kyogo?
I mean, I think his technical ability is above a level of almost anyone in the squad. I mean, just looking at him. I mean, as you say, we both watched the full game today. I think he was obviously holding back a bit. I don't think he was pressing as much as he usually does. I think he was obviously saving himself a bit. I think he obviously knows he has his big move to Europe. He's hardly going to be flying about the pitch into tackles. But by all accounts, he is a pressing attacker. He does make tackles. He does close down the ball. He's not all about grace and composure and finishing, but he looks to have all that in his locker as well, and that's what's exciting when you look at him. I think his technical ability on the ball and even his vision and his intelligence and positioning, I think all look spot on. It's really hard to tell from a signing you've not seen 15, 20 games of, or a player that doesn't play in a league that you're not particularly up on. But from what I've seen, this is about as excited as I've been about a signing for a long time. And I think he could be a special talent in Scotland. I think he's probably a level above of many players in this division. And it's just about how he settles now. We know that he'll fit into Ange's plans, so I'm excited to see what he's offered. Another good thing about this, Ryan, is that he's been playing regularly in the J League for the last few months. He's not getting up to speed. He's got 15, 16 goals in all competitions. He's in red hot form, and he's ready for this move. He's ready to step up, and that's what I like most about this.
And I think that is the thing as well. You see some people talking about him as a sort of project signing, and he's really not, because he's 25 years old. He's been arguably the best player in the J League this season, or definitely the best Japanese player in the J League this season. 15, 16 goals already. It's good that we're bringing it. It makes sense in every sort of avenue. I think it makes sense for the marketing avenue. It's good to tap into that Japanese market. And also it's one of Ange's signings as well, and the fact that he's a good player, it's definitely encouraging.
And
but
you know what it is, Ryan, as well. It's just like, I think the club needed to make a signing like that was like something that kind of shut up the doubters that Ange isn't being backed by the club, or that Ange isn't getting his own players in. I mean, the comment, people were saying who's signing these players at Celtic. I don't think anyone's in any doubt who signed this player. And I think
absolutely.
The club needed that as much as anything. I think it's a signing that the club can hang their hat on, Ange can hang his hat on, and I think ultimately, and this is a prediction, I think ultimately this signing will be seen as a coup for Celtic, that they've done really well to get this guy in.
Well, fingers crossed that is the case. Another guy we're hoping to get in the door in the next couple of days is Carl Starfelt. You heard Lennart Slutsky in his post-match, or his sort of press conference, talking about the deal is basically done. It's all about announcements now, which is great to hear, especially after watching today's defence. If Starfelt was to come in the next couple of days, would you throw him in straight away in the first team for Midtjylland?
I think it's too late now. I think it's too late for this first leg. I think the players that are here are going to feature in that first leg. Obviously, you can be registered up to Monday, Starfelt, and he would be available for the second leg in Denmark on the 28th. But I think for this game on Tuesday, I think it's just a little bit too soon for any new players coming in. I don't think I'm even expecting Abada to start, but I could be wrong. But yeah, no, I think again the Starfelt signing and the profile of it makes sense. He's he's got a bit more experience. He's played in the Swedish top flight. He's played in the Russian top flight. He's got a bit about himself. He's got his own style. He's got his own kind of arrogance almost, and that's what we need in defence, and that's what we'll need if we're also relying on some of the young players in defence like Welsh and Urhoghide.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be good for a player like Starfelt to sort of guide them along the game, and even for Welsh, because he's only 21 years old at the end of the day. He's still in the sort of beginnings of his Celtic career. So it'd be good to have someone that's 25, 26 that's very comfortable playing in that position. He's got sort of mileage in his career, you would say. And in terms of looking at other sort of positions on the field after watching today and all the other pre-season games, what other sort of positions do you think need filled in terms of signings? Because I know you were mentioning left back, and I do agree. I was tweeting during the game, I think we need a left back just as much as we need a right back, especially for the way that Ange plays bombing forward. I just don't think Taylor's that sort of attacking. He's got that sort of attacking prowess that we need. He's okay defensively, but he can't really attack very well. And right back's obviously its own problem. So, what do you think in terms of positions that need filled?
I mean that's spot on. I mean, I think I would say right back's probably more urgent, because I think if you said to any Celtic fan this time last year that Anthony Ralston would be our first choice, and again, no harm to Anthony Ralston. Sure, he's a nice guy, but he's been at Celtic for years and he's never made a breakthrough. And there's a reason for that. It's not that he's been held back or not been given chances. He's been given chances early on. He's been sent out on loan. The club will be very well aware of what his development path has been. And I think to be relying on him at this stage is a little bit of a shambles, but these transfers take time. Ange said you can't just expect players to get on a plane and arrive at Celtic, so let's see what the next week brings. But yeah, we're a little bit undercooked for Tuesday. I know, as always, Ryan, full of hope. I am personally.
Yep, I'm the eternal optimist, but even now I'm dreading Wednesday a wee bit. Sort of final thing to talk about before we end the sort of live reaction is to do with right back as well. I would go back to talk about right back. We've obviously been linked with a couple of players. Brandon Soppy looks like the sort of main link. How would you feel about him coming into the first team, or Boy for that matter as well? I know we've been linked with both from Rennes.
Yeah, it's interesting. These are two guys I know less about than the other transfer links we have, just because I feel slightly less confident about them coming off. I feel really confident Starfelt's going to happen. I've felt like that for the last week, so you kind of do more research into him and look at what he's all about. I think, obviously they're highly rated in their end setup. For whatever reason, there's a multitude of reasons why they could want to be leaving the club at the moment. I think Soppy's got a year left on his contract, and so now is the time for his big move. There's chat coming from Fabrizio Romano, everyone's favourite transfer journalist, that Watford and Udinese are also keen. I think if there's English and Italian clubs, they could muscle us out with that one, but it's an interesting one. Yeah, again, I would like to get a young, there's nothing wrong with getting a young, talented French player in the door. It's served us well over the years, and I'd be up for that again.
Yeah, definitely. And the sort of last thing I want to talk about, I know I said the last thing there, but what would be your sort of prediction for the first leg on Wednesday against Midtjylland? What do you think? As optimistic as you are, John?
I'll say we'll win 1-0 on Tuesday. That'll do me. I'd take a 1-0 all day. It'd be scary going to Denmark with that, but I could see us winning on Tuesday narrowly. I don't think Midtjylland are a great team, and I think it has to be remembered that they're also going through a transition at the moment. They've also got a new manager, so it's not, this isn't the same team as the team that played in the Champions League group stages last season, and a few of their players are wanting away again as well. So I'm going to go 1-0 for that one. What about yourself?
I'm going to go a 2-1, but it's just due to that defence, the way that it's creaking a wee bit watching it. You see the amount of balls that are going into the box and they're not getting dealt with at the first opportunity. It becomes a bit of a sort of pinball defending at the end of it. But I'm hoping that we're still in the tie come the second leg. That's me. I'm trying to be as optimistic as I can. But
well, away goals
as long as we're in the tie,
so that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
No, we've been terrible with away goals over the past couple of years, but fingers crossed we can navigate this and then hopefully have Europe after Christmas. or sort of Euros until Christmas rather. But,
Yeah.
thanks very much for joining me, John, and my
Yeah,
debut,
no worries, Ryan.
my debut live reaction. Hopefully it went okay, not too shaky. But there'll be plenty of content coming out over the next week, and we'll have the live reaction coming out from the Michelin game right after the game.
Yep.
So thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. See you later.
Cheers.